right, let's bring the conversation closer to home as Senate President Akpabio has highlighted Nigeria's low tax compliance, stating that less than 30% of citizens contribute to government revenue despite demands for infrastructure, education and security. Speaking at a public hearing on tax reform bills in Abuja, he stressed the need for change, arguing that Nigeria cannot expect different results while maintaining the same tax structure. Akpabio assured that the National Assembly would strengthen oversight to ensure proper use of taxpayers' funds. He criticized those opposing the reforms without reviewing the proposed laws and encouraged Nigerians to study the bills rather than rely on social media narratives. We will now bring in a Rise News analyst for a conversation about the Senate President's claim that only 30% of Nigerians pay tax and his attempt to link tax payment to the provision of infrastructure. Mr. Dayo Sobowale, thank you so much for joining us today for your analysis, and good afternoon.
It's a pleasure being here as usual. Right.
All right. So many things to take away from this statement. Very loaded statement, if I do say so myself. What are your initial takeaways?
You see, the statement was taken out of context. That's my view. Because it said so many things on the tax reform. That's the Senate President. And it was appealing to Nigerians, stakeholders, even legislators to try and understand the provisions of the reforms. That it is a change from the old ways of doing things. But you see, this one that he said about Nigerians not paying tax, 30%, it is because he's the one talking. See, I will say the media literally took an ad hominem approach to what he's saying. Well, it's a fallacy. If you leave the person, if you leave the topic on the ground and you start talking about the person making the statement, this is what is happening. You see, most Nigerians nowadays hear politicians with some skepticism, which means they are losing some credibility, and they better take that seriously. But what is at stake here is that at long last, the legislative process is playing itself out. They say there are about 71 stakeholders that will face the National Assembly on this tax thing. But then the consensus is gathering momentum that it is something we need. Even the taxman in charge has said that they want to move our tax to revenue ratio from about 10% to 80% in 3 years, which is good. If we have sufficient income and find leadership who will repair our infrastructure and build new ones. And if you notice, this government has been busy on infrastructure financing. Although the problem with our taxation is that if you look at that statement that 30% of Nigerians don't pay tax, yes, but we have an informal sector which contributes to about 50% to our GDP. It is there. And if you say they don't pay tax, there are levies that are put on people in markets, market levies. There are road levies that are put on people at checkpoints and all that. But you see, the important thing is to follow what the Minister of Finance said, that they will fine-tune the tax system, which is what they are doing. And when they do that, they will plug the holes and try and bring in people. You get me? But I will add that I say once we plug the hole and we improve our revenue to tax ratio, we should not go about borrowing so much that at the end of the day we spend the money raised on taxation and all that in paying debts. But as it is, I look at issues from the welfare state perspective. So I don't mind having a deficit as long as the deficit is productive and is used for public goods that everybody benefits from. Let's leave it at that for now.
And I'm glad you brought that up, because as much as these tax reforms are being put forward as almost some sort of a silver bullet, the reality is that there's a trust deficit, because over time we've seen that the revenue is not entirely spent on developmental projects. what do you think the government needs to do to try and regain trust? Because we're already seeing these infrastructure projects, but there's still a deficit.
Is precisely why I said it was taken out of context. He addressed all this. That, you see, people should understand the reforms, have trust in it, and they will do their own duty as oversight managers. They will make the laws, and they will see that the money is spent for the purpose for which it is meant. It's in that session. But the one that was taken out and highlighted is what you are discussing, that Nigerians who want to pay tax and they want to enjoy infrastructure. If another person has said it, nobody will report it. But this is because he is the one. You get me? Because if you are talking of revenue collection, you must talk, and you are talking of tax evasion, you must talk accountability. And somewhat, he has addressed that accountability too. But from past records, what did you said, in the past, we've been at this sort of taxation for years, and this time we moved on. And we must, how do I put it, recharge, repair our infrastructure and make new ones. We should not be like Germany, which was built after the World War, and now all of a sudden, since 1948, the infrastructure was built by the Marshall Plan, built by the US. But their trains, their tracks, everything, they have not maintained them, and they are in dire straits. You get me? This government, from the way it is doing things, is interested in infrastructure development. It's interested in, investment, foreign investment coming into the country. But it should lean more on doing more for the welfare of Nigerians, because at the end of the day, it's the electorate that put them in power. Yes.
Absolutely. But still talking about accountability, especially given the same individual, the Senate President who's speaking, who oversaw the process of the 2024 budget and the 2025 budget. We now know that the 2024 budget only performed at 25%. So I hear you speaking about accountability, but it seems that there's an intrinsic issue in the system that totally removes accountability. So how do we regain people's trust when it seems that there's nothing in the system that points towards accountability?
You see, if you look backwards at our system, you see, budget padding has always been there. So if you talk of budget padding, it is difficult to monitor transparency or even accountability, even though he is the one saying it. That's why I mentioned a credibility problem and the skepticism of Nigerians, that you must walk the talk. Up till now, it is still difficult to know how much the legislators are earning.
Yeah, exactly.
And that is the aluminum I'm talking about, that you are the one telling us this. Your leadership should be by example. But that is the nature of our politics. And you see, it is not peculiar to us. You see what Trump is doing in the US? You see, he's trying to cost bureaucracy, trying to cost expenditure. But you see, I believe, like I said, I believe in deficit financing, and I believe in austerity too, the way you can manage it. But I believe we should not use, if we do welfareistic things, we should not use market forces and competition to judge the relevance to the economy. Because ultimately, if we have good, capable, educated, healthy individuals in the economy will grow.
Yes,
that's right. So that's my take.
Now, we've seen a season over the past past 1 year, where citizens are rising up against taxation. In Kenya, we've seen an instance in South Africa now where there's a lot of discussion around and debate around increase in VAT. Zimbabwe as well is also looking for a way to reduce the number of taxes and to streamline taxing. People are concerned because when you hear tax, it's a scary thing because people feel it's money coming out of my pocket. This process is going through, but do you ultimately think that Nigerians are going to buy into this tax reform?
Eventually, they will buy into it. They will buy into it. And that's why I mentioned welfareism the other time. You see, if you see the countries that have the highest taxation to revenue taxation to revenue ratio. They have very good, they are welfare states. Denmark, Switzerland, Sweden, yes. It's like all the facilities you need to exist and live the decent life is virtually free and available. That is supposed to be our goal. If these tax people say, by in 3 years' time, 18%, then I think for Africa it's 50% tax to revenue basis. You have to start stronger. That the fact that this reform can come on board is a welcome development. So even those who criticize this government say that it is taking on too many things at the same time. But because we have been lagging behind, and you see, we need to move forward. We need to move forward. So this gloomy picture, you get me? I'm sure once the dividends of these reforms, once the dividends of the sacrifice people are making, once the dividends of the pain of the economic reforms, once they show their faces, people will relax and move on.
And there's also the debate that infrastructure, roads, bridges are not a sign of development. Like you're saying, you're emphasizing on the welfare state. But do you think infrastructure is a priority when we're speaking of development, especially from revenue generated from tax? Because there's also public-private partnerships. There's so many ways to achieve infrastructure development. Should that be coming out of, should it be linked to taxpayers' money?
That's why I said it is because of the man saying it. That is why people are talking like it. Infrastructure is the life of the community. You get me? It's like the human skeleton. The body cannot do anything without the skeleton. All the other things are built on it. And infrastructure is something everybody enjoys. It's not an exclusive thing that only the rich do have. So that is why investment in it is an ongoing thing. It costs money. It costs into the budget, but it's needed. That is why government goes out of its way to borrow money to do it and face a deficit financing. But the difference will pay when the roads are. You are laughing at me the other side. What I say, if the roads are good and our transportation system can move, then trade will flow. You get me? So we need infrastructure. And infrastructure is not only about trade, schools, hospitals, and all that. All these are taken for granted in the Nordic countries. Denmark, they are taken for granted. So hopefully we will move in that direction. It's a matter of time and the quality of leadership and trust, like you said, in the leadership. Which was why they turned Akpabio's good intention upside down. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Dayo Sobowale, like you said, it's an ad hominem. We're only talking about it because of the person who said it. It's not. It's a conversation that's being unpacked in several places. Mr. Dayo Sobowale, thank you so much for your time and your analysis. Always a pleasure to have you.